My name is Michelle Dunn. I'm Executive Director of Franciscan Action Network. So hello, friends. Thank you very much for being with us today, and welcome to our webinar on present dynamics in Palestine and effective action opportunities. I want to thank my colleague, our Just Peace Fellow, Dr. Eli McCarthy, for putting together what I think will be a very informative and educational webinar today. So here we are, 4 days into another U.S. war in the Middle East, which started with a U.S. and Israeli air war against Iran and now is spiraling out of control, involving many countries and causing immense human suffering with no end in sight. Now, our subject for our webinar today is not Iran, it's Palestine, specifically Gaza and the West Bank, which is the site of another major war in the Middle East that is still going on despite an announced ceasefire. And that's what we're here to learn about today. These two wars, however, I want to say, are linked by what I would describe as a joint U.S.-Israeli project to remake this region according to the interests of those two countries at a terrifying human cost. As some of you know, I'm a former U.S. diplomat. I worked for the U.S. State Department for just about 20 years, and I participated directly in former U.S. negotiations between Israel and Palestine, particularly in the 1990s. At that time, I thought I was working for peace and human rights in the Middle East, including Palestinian national rights. But looking back on it now, I see that those negotiations were already part of this same U.S.-Israeli joint project to remake the region, and part of that project is to prevent the emergence of a Palestinian state. And it's just that at that time, the execution was not as overt as it is now and not nearly as violent as what's happening now. So we have so much to learn about this subject, so much to pray about, so much to take action about today. During this hour, you're going to hear from a wonderful panel of experts on Palestine, several of them joining us from Palestine directly, and also a Jewish rabbi and a Franciscan friar who are active in peace efforts. There will be a panel discussion, and then you're going to be able to ask them questions. So I want you to take a look on your screen and find the Q&A function. The chat is going to be turned off during the webinar to avoid distractions, but you will be able to submit written questions through the Q&A function. And I want to encourage you to go in and put your question in at any time when you're ready to do so. Don't wait for the panel to be over, because those written questions will be accumulating, and then we will bring them forward in the Q&A part of the webinar. So please use that throughout the webinar. You're also going to hear about lots of different advocacy opportunities towards the end of the webinar. So please stay on for that. And don't worry, all of the resources that are mentioned, as well as a recording of this session, will be shared with you in a follow-up email that you will get tomorrow. So we're ready to get started now, and we will open, as always, with prayer. After that, we're going to go directly to Dr. Eli McCarthy, Just Peace Fellow at FAN, who's going to introduce our panelists to you. But first, I would like to invite my colleague from Franciscan Action Network, Sister Maria Orlandini, to start us off with prayer.
Let us pray. Loving God, refuge and strength, we witness the violence and injustice in your holy land, and our hearts break. We pray for an end to the bloodshed and the protection of innocent lives. Comfort those who have lost loved ones, and be a shield for those who cannot flee. We ask that you soften the hearts of all involved replacing hatred and fear with empathy and understanding. Grant wisdom and courage to leaders to engage in meaningful dialogue and work towards a just and lasting resolution. Break the barriers of suspicion and mistrust. May your peace take root in these scorched places, and may the people of Palestine find safety, justice, and hope for a future free from fear. Amen.
All right. Thank you so much, Sister Maria. It's wonderful to be with you all today. Thanks for joining us. Really excited for this conversation and broadening of our imaginations. The topic is present dynamics in Palestine and effective action opportunities. So we're going to focus on two questions. What is happening on the ground in Gaza and the West Bank today? And second, what strategic nonviolent actions might we take in accord with the way of just peace? So let me introduce our panelists. Amira Masalam is the head of mission of the Unarmed Civilian Protection Project in Palestine and is based in Bethlehem. Omar Harami, a combination of identities, an Arab, a Palestinian, a Jerusalemite, a Greek Orthodox, a Christian. Since 2019, Omar has served as the director of Sabeel, the Center of Palestinian Liberation Theology. Sabeel is an ecumenical grassroots liberation theology movement among Palestinians that seeks to deepen the faith of Palestinian Christians, to promote unity among them, and lead them to act for justice, peace, and nonviolence. Omar also serves on the Kairos Palestine Steering Committee. Olivia Tappy is the North America coordinator for the Palestinian-led Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Movement, and she lives in Portland, Oregon. Jennifer Bing is the National Director of the U.S. Palestine Activism Program at the American Friends Service Committee. And Father Jacek is a friar of the province of Our Lady of Guadalupe with over 20 years experience in the peace-building efforts in the Holy Land. So the format is a panel discussion with dynamics in Palestine and then effective action opportunities. So just a reminder to put your written questions in the Q&A as they come up for you, and we will sort through them when we get to that moment. So let's begin. Dynamics in Palestine. Let's start with Jennifer. If you would be willing to give us an update on kind of what's going on in Gaza at this point regarding humanitarian aid, violence, reconstruction, and particularly this Board of Peace project.
Thank you, Eli. And it's wonderful to see so many people joining. Just to say, the American Friends Service Committee, a Quaker organization, has had a presence in Gaza since 1948, working alongside Palestinians. So we've been there for decades now and continue to have staff on the ground. And I was able to speak this morning with some of them. So I will share their greetings from you all to them to help them in these very difficult days during Ramadan and during what is not a ceasefire in Gaza, which the continued suffering that all of us have seen on our screens for the last 2.5 years. Aid is still not getting into Gaza. Not even before the recent war with Iran as well. The promise for having aid delivery open up and to stop the starvation and to restock the hospitals and allow in school supplies and all these things, all those promises have not been taken. And the the suffering is ongoing. Many aid agencies have been very concerned about the developments with the Board of Peace and the efforts to take over control of Gaza. As some of you, if you follow the news, have seen that the small strip of land of Gaza, which is only 25 miles long, has now been split in half. So for its population that was already in a dense area now is living in less than 50% of Gaza. And the kind of magical thinking about what could be constructed, a resort type of thing. I I don't know how anyone can see this other than kind of gross colonization. With the Board of Peace, Palestinians really are not involved in the plans. There is a technical committee that has been set up, but even this technical committee doesn't have really a clear sense of how they will be able to operate. As we know, President Trump is at the top of this new Board of Peace, and all decisions are to be made by him. No accountability mechanisms are there, no legal framework. All of this is in violation of international law. And I could say what I heard today was that one of the people who was talking about the land development and plotting where the population would live in Gaza, they didn't even have the basic information about Gaza. They didn't even know that there was private ownership of land in Gaza. So when they were asked, like, how do you plan to develop these resorts and so forth with people's personal property, they didn't even realize that there was personal property ownership. So this lack of knowledge about Palestinian history and the Gaza Palestinians' lives in Gaza is does not bode well, let's just say, for all the plans. Also, we're really concerned about the new police forces that are being planned. I saw a chart of the different dividing Gaza up into 5 different areas with different countries sending in troops to monitor this. Like the whole idea is unworkable in our opinion, and in the opinion of most of the organization NGOs that operate in Gaza. We continue to be concerned about the militarization of aid, and that's been an ongoing thing throughout this genocide in Gaza. So I only have 3 minutes, but I'll do my best to answer more questions and give you more links in the chat about Gaza. But I appreciate all your prayers and also your advocacy. It's so important to not forget about Palestinians in Gaza as we go forward, because those are our weapons that are in use.
Thank you, Jennifer. I really appreciate the updates and some of the important kind of facts that we need to know to kind of assess and figure out how we can be constructive at this moment. So let's turn a bit to the West Bank, and we can start with Omar. What is going on in the West Bank regarding violence or policies? And just a couple minutes, and then we'll turn to Amira.
Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you, dear friends. The Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, was supposed to constitute what would become the Palestinian state. After multiple years, after the Oslo Accords, it became very clear for Palestinians that there was no intention to have a two-state solution. The West Bank has become divided into 3 sections: Area A, Area B, and Area C, where there's a distribution of administrative and security control. Israel is issuing legislation and facts on the ground to confiscate 2/3 of the West Bank, of what would have been potentially the Palestinian state. We are losing the breadbasket of the West Bank. We're losing the water reserves and the resources. Palestinians are trapped into smaller communities. East Jerusalem, which is one of the biggest Palestinian cities, Jerusalem is home for 500,000 Palestinians. They are completely divided and segregated from the rest of the Palestinian community. Jerusalem is like a small prison where both Muslims and Christians have little interactions with the rest of the West Bank. It is illegal for us, or it is almost impossible for us to work outside Jerusalem. It is very difficult to study, for the students to study outside Jerusalem. It is also very difficult to fall in love and to get married to somebody who's outside this enclave that has become the city of Jerusalem. And Jerusalem, which is home for the largest hospitals in the West Bank, the biggest eye hospital in the West Bank, the biggest hospital that is specialized in treating people with cancer, is almost impossible for Palestinians outside East Jerusalem to get in, to become part of, unless they are able to obtain a military permit. To obtain a military permit to go to church, a military permit to fall in love, a military permit to visit loved ones, a military permit to go to school. It is very difficult living under military boots. Israel is planning to annex most of the empty land of the West Bank, if not all of it, and confiscate all of the resources, and leaving us as Palestinians trapped into small enclaves.
Thank you, Omar, for mapping that out for us. The intense systemic struggle and oppression that is occurring in the West Bank. Amira, could you pick up on this and add a little bit for us?
Yes, Omar talked about IDF, about the state, about the military, and I would continue and say the state is using a very dangerous, actually, tool, and I like to call it a tool because it is a tool of ethnic cleansing the Palestinian, which is settlers. Settlers who are just civilians, armed, dangerous criminals who are doing and acting in the place of the state, like militias. Imagine like militias attacking people, and instead of the IDF doing their work in ethnically cleansing us, they are sending these people to build new outposts, pastoral outposts, where they are like they have sheep, camels. They are just imitating the life of Palestinian farmers and Palestinian Bedouins. And so they go to Area C, which is under the Israeli administrative and military control, so no access of the Palestinian Authority there. And they send them there. They build their outpost. An outpost is a small, unstructured settlement in Area C, in these lands. These lands are owned by Palestinians. Even lots of these lands are owned by the church, by the Palestinian state, and so on. But still, these settlers come in, they sit there, they are armed and protected also by the Israeli law, protected by Smotrich and Ben Gvir. They use all kind of methods to attack us. For example, by intimidating us during the night, the day, bringing their sheep into between the houses of the Bedouins and the communities living in these areas, and mixing them with the sheep and animals of the community, and then saying that the community stole their sheep, even if we have all the evidence that it's not true. Of course, the police are just complicit and encouraging those settlers to do more. They burn homes, vehicles, crops, they cut trees, block access to grazing land and water. They establish these pastoral outposts to expand territorial control. And often, most of these settlers are operating with military escort or under army protection. So, for example, just one incident that I can talk about now, and I have 1 million example, where last 2 weeks ago, in one of the villages near Jericho, the settlers came wearing the IDF uniform, armed, with some trucks and bulldozers, and they bulldozed a whole community of like 65 people. 23 of them are children. They demolished their houses, they took over their land, and they beat them. They even arrested some of them and took them to the police station or the army station nearby. And people are just very afraid. They don't want to leave their land. But imagine you living in this kind of area in the outskirts of the city, and you have absolutely no protection from nobody. And these settlers are coming, either killing your people, either stealing your sheep, the only source of income. So at the end, these people have to leave their lands and their homes.
Okay.
So this is just a small example.
Thank you, Amir. Really, thanks for illustrating that. You can see, like, the intensity of the on the ground kind of interpersonal violence that's happening there, and the need for strategies of protection. And Amir will share a little bit more about that shortly. The acronym IDF stands for Israeli Defense Forces, just to clarify. So, Father Yasik, maybe like in a minute or so, is there anything you want to add just about what's going on the ground? And then we'll bring you back to talk about effective actions in the second part.
Great. So this past January, I spent 2 weeks in the West Bank doing some accompaniment. And even though I've been to the West Bank several times over the years, I was surprised by the extent and the speed of the settlement expansion, new outposts, new roads, and the economic strangulation. It was clear to me that what I witness in the West Bank is the unfolding genocide in the West Bank, and also the way in which churches have been targeted. Later on, you will hear from Father Bashar about one specific example of it, but also when I was in Jerusalem and learn about the how Israel make it very difficult for the operation of the Franciscans of the Terra Santa schools, about another kind of issue of what happens to people that are detained by Israelis. Oftentimes, I mean, it's many Jewish peace organizations indicate that those prisons are torture camps. And another thing that I would like to kind of mention is that it's not only the Palestinian people in the West Bank that are in a profound crisis. I think it's also a profound crisis for us in the United States. especially during this time of Lent. Where are we in this story? I was very much conscious of being complicit in, as an American, in this genocide, and it's a moment of kind of Kairos moment for us. To whom do we belong? Who do we follow? Do we follow the Prince of Truth, the Prince of Peace, the one who Jesus, who is the truth, the way, and the life, or we allow ourselves to be ensnared by fear? Are we in communion with the churches in the Holy Land, from within with the roots that are at the core of who we are? So that's yet another crisis that is more demanding. I mean, also demanding an answer and a decisive response from us. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Gasek, for visiting and being present there and sharing some of the connections here with our faith and the Franciscan communities that are present in the area. So we have one video clip that we'd like to share with you from Rabbi Alyssa Weiss, who was unfortunately unable to make it because of a holiday. But this will give you a little sense of kind of her thoughts on kind of what's going on in the ground, and then we'll bring her back later for her ideas on effective actions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rabbi Alyssa Wise, the founding director at Rabbis for Ceasefire, and I'm really sorry I couldn't be with you live. It's Purim today, a holiday rooted in the book of Esther, a very complicated story, but I'm off today celebrating that holiday. But I'm excited to have a minute to say hello and encourage everyone. If you want to respond or ask follow-up questions to anything I'm saying, you can find me at Alyssa at rabbisforceasefire.com. So thinking about the conditions on the ground and actually thinking about the holiday of Purim, we at Rabbis for Ceasefire this Purim have been moving money to the Gaza Soup Kitchen. We've had an ongoing partnership with the Gaza Soup Kitchen over the past number of months, primarily moving money. In 2025, we were able to move $600,000 to the Gaza Soup Kitchen from individuals making small gifts tied to Jewish holiday cycle. So we did a big push at the high holidays when a lot of Jews give money. And Purim, the holiday today, actually has a few core obligations, and one of them is protecting those at the margins, called Matanot LeEvyonim. And so this year for Purim, we encourage people to make their gift in honor of Ramadan and our solidarity with people in Gaza. And we've been in close touch with Hani, whose brother founded the Gaza Soup Kitchen. Sadly, he was murdered by an Israeli drone in 2024, a chef who started Gaza Soup Kitchen. But his brother Hani has taken on keeping the Gaza Soup Kitchen going. And we were just in touch with him today regarding our fundraiser. And of course, since the US-Israel attacks on Iran, as they always do, reverberate into how Israel addresses issues on the ground in Gaza, the West Bank, and they have closed the Rafah crossing into Gaza, including for humanitarian aid. So Hani was saying that the costs of food have tripled overnight, right? So we've been over Purim encouraging people to sponsor a box of food from the Gaza Soup Kitchen, which will feed a family for a week. It was $25, right? Now it's 3 times that cost, right? So what they would spend on 6,000 boxes of food will now only pay for 700 boxes of food. Because when the border crossings are closed and there's no way to get in, then, the costs skyrocket. So, there's these reverberations of these violent attacks, of these murderous regimes throughout the region, and really cognizant also that it'll likely increase the project of ethnic cleansing in the West Bank.
Right. Thank you, Rabbi. So thank you, everyone, for kind of helping us get a more nuanced, kind of very personal and descriptive sense of the challenges in Gaza and the West Bank today, and the systemic violence and the ongoing attacks. So we want to invite you all back now to kind of help us unpack some effective nonviolent actions or opportunities that we can kind of lean into. So as we're moving to the second part, just a reminder for folks to put in the Q&A any questions that are coming up, and we'll sort through those after this part. So let's start with Omar. And Omar, I'd ask if you could share a little bit about how delegations to the region can contribute to mitigating the violence and moving toward just peace.
Sadly, in the last decade, or at least in the last few years, many people around the world believe that we as an international community, although it seemed that we have developed a model of international law and human rights, a system where people can live and abide with, in the logic to avoid war, or when war breaks out, that we would be able to manage conflicts. It seemed that we do not have a plan or an alternative to how people have been living since the beginning of dawn. Survival for the fittest, or survival is for the strongest beast. We need to build collective solidarity for people around the world, people hand in hand, who are willing to defend the values that we have as civilized nations, people have developed. So, delegations are an instrument, a tool that we have to get people on the ground. We get people on the ground for multiple reasons. One is a learning process. They need to come and see the realities for themselves. There's different tools that people can have, but the best tool is being on the ground. Watching a movie, taking a course, or listening to a lecture similar to this webinar is helpful, but it does not replace people having a direct experience and building networks with the people on the ground. When people are informed, they are able to act and to be more involved and more effective. The second part is the presence on the ground is just when people are watching and people know that they're being watched, it helps people to behave better. This applies for Israelis and Palestinians. People just, when they know that they're being watched, they try their best to adhere with the values that they claim to have. Although many times we as humans fail these values. So Palestinians behave better, behave more courageously, and act in a more responsible way towards their communities and themselves. The same thing from Israelis. Reports have identified that checkpoints where there are people monitoring them, Israelis or internationals, they have 90% lower cases of violence. Settlers or military who are being monitored or seen by tourists or pilgrims in the land are also 80% lower to be engaged in violence in front of people. Especially when there's journalists, when there's people holding cameras, people behave better. The third part of it, which is very important, is just being present. People need to listen. They need ears, shoulders for people to listen to them, shoulders that people are able to cry for. And this is something people who are in the midst of trauma are not able to provide one another, even as hard as we try to do. So just being present in this space, even when you feel that you're not able to do much, you are doing greater. Reports by psychologists, by people who are experts in the field, they say people who have been able to share their stories, they have a much higher chance of dealing with their trauma and overcoming it. So these are like just three parts, but there's plenty of ways that being present on the ground is helpful, like supporting the local economy, helping to build networks, coordinating, building synergies. All of these are also additional and extremely important additions.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Omar. And I highly recommend these delegations with Sabeel. I went on one last August. I know a number of people that have gone on multiple delegations with Omar and Sabeel. There's Friends of Sabeel North America here in the US that can help connect you and organize different trips. So we'll send out some information later about that. Let's turn to Amira. And Amira's got this really amazing project, the Unarmed Civilian Protection in Palestine. So, how can that project contribute to mitigating the violence and perhaps moving toward a just peace?
Okay, unarmed civilian protection is not a new methodology or practice. It has been used all over the world from different organizations, different actors and practitioners. And 2 years ago, a beautiful team and beautiful people from all around the world came together and said, okay, what should we do about Palestine and bring this practice to Palestine? And that's when we started looking into how can unarmed civilian protection work. We did an assessment that is, I can provide later the link for that assessment, and we got a report where it says unarmed civilian protection is a need in Palestine. It's needed not only to document and take more footage and do social media, but to document for accountability. This is first thing. The second thing also, we found that people need accompaniment, need presence. And these communities who are being attacked every day by these settler terrorism, when there is nobody looking, it happens very, very quickly. Like in few days, they can just attack the community, hurt them, and then the community is forced to leave. But we saw when there is protective presence present in the communities, at the end, maybe they would leave or they would be forced to leave, but at least they will not be alone. They will be seen. We live with them. We do UCPIP, our initiative. We do 24/7 protective presence. So we live with the communities. We don't leave them day and night. We share with them their food, their life, their sadness and their fears even. And we do interpositioning between them and the settlers. We do de-escalation when the situation is really, really hard. And we are not alone there. There are so many different organizations doing this work on the ground, each one doing it differently, but at the same time, we all have the same goal, which is protecting these communities. So we do accompany children to schools. We do accompany shepherds to the field to graze their sheep. We document, and then we send all these kind of documentation. Many of the footage that these practitioners took were able to help people who were accused of, for example, hurting a settler, to get them out of jail, and instead of being accused of something that they never did. So this is very important. And there are not a lot of people doing this. We need more people. So unarmed civilian protection is a need and a must. And by bringing more people to the field now, okay, the airports are closed because of the war, but after that, we really need more people to step in and help us. We have very few people, even with all the organizations doing this work. And with the escalation of the settler violence, there are new places every day, new areas, new communities that are being attacked. So just to, yeah, because I have a little time to say, I would say unarmed civilian protection does not solve the political root cause, but it creates breathing space where families can remain on their land, where children can sleep, where hope is not completely erased, and in place where violence has become normalized. Protecting one family, one school, one shepherd, one night at a time, that is not small. That is resistance, and that is dignity, and that is a step toward just peace. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful, Amira. Such important and courageous work. We've heard a number of stories about this, and it's scaling up across the world in various places. And this is a really important place to either go and participate, or maybe to support financially, or through kind of getting the word out and the stories and bringing people to speak about it. So we'll send you some follow-up information about that as well. Let me pause here before I go to Olivia. Is there anybody else on the panel who wants to add a short thought about delegations or unarmed civilian protection?
Alai, I just want to add one thing, and I think this is important for all of us to hear. It's not UCPIP specialty. I think the support that we really need is the financial support for everybody on the ground, because I think there is a very lack of resources that is being sent to these organizations, the different organizations that are doing this important work on the ground. The big INGOs are focusing on like Gaza and are focusing on other areas, and the West Bank, they just talk about it, but they are not really, we don't really see support, not for the organizations doing this work, and also for the people who are being displaced. Like really, we have, like for example, Ras Ain Al Auja, where we were doing protective presence, they were ethnically cleansed 1 month ago. 600 people are without homes, without food, without schools, without anything. So we really need lots of support for that, also for like humanitarian aid. So it's really important thing to do, to support if you can. Even small amount of money can make a change.
Thank you so much, Amira. All right, let's turn to Olivia. Olivia, how can the efforts to expose, to boycott, and divest from corporations like Chevron and Palantir mitigate the violence and move us closer toward a just peace?
Yeah, thanks, Eli. So, for those who aren't familiar, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Movement, or BDS, is a nonviolent movement to pressure Israel to end its human rights violations against Palestinians. And it was really modeled off the South African anti-apartheid movement, where international boycotts and divestment and eventually sanctions helped create the pressure that, excuse me, led to the fall of apartheid rule in South Africa. The fact of the matter is that if the United States was not sending the weapons and the funding, the genocide would not be possible. Israel's regime of apartheid and occupation would not be possible to sustain without the involvement of major global corporations and institutions, which is in direct violation of international law. So BDS works to end that support. As Eli mentioned, many of our boycott and divestment targets are these big corporations like Chevron and Palantir, due to their complicity in Israel's genocide, apartheid, and occupation. So, with these boycott and divestment campaigns, it's not just about individuals boycotting through their own purchases or divesting through their own like personal individual investments. It's really about collective action. So creating enough collective pressure that results in a win, whether that be a company pulling out of Israel completely, which we have succeeded in doing many times before, or whether it's, a massive institution, whether it be a church or a union or a pension fund, divesting its funds from a complicit company, or from the Israeli government itself in the form of Israel bonds. It's all about using these tactics in a collective way to create enough pressure through the B and the D, boycotting and divesting, to build us to the S, sanctions. And the primary sanction we are calling for right now is an arms embargo. And these sorts of grassroots campaigns help to shift public opinion and help to put pressure and sometimes remove these corporate pillars of support that Israel relies on to sustain its occupation and apartheid, which in turn helps us build the movement that's necessary to pressure decision makers to stop the flow of weapons and end our complicity in Israel's violence. And an exciting thing about these campaign targets like Chevron and Palantir is that they are intersectional, meaning we are working with other movements for justice as well, who are also campaigning against these corporations for their human rights violations. So with Chevron, we're closely partnered with the climate justice movement, who for years have been trying to get Chevron to stop destroying and poisoning the planet. And with Palantir, we're also partnered with the immigrant rights movement in the US because Palantir is closely partnered with ICE, and ICE relies on Palantir in order to collect data and surveil and arrest people. And I know I have a very limited amount of time. There are many kinds of examples of how you can take part in these campaigns just in your local communities. And I would love to talk to you more about it if you're interested in getting involved. I'll also put a link to our website where you can find a lot more information and action alerts on how to get involved.
Yeah, excellent, Olivia. Thank you so much. And thank you for your work and just kind of making those connections with how this pressure on corporations can create the conditions to impact some of the political decision makers and the weapons and so forth. And there have been some really big moves in this, not just with South Africa, right? But in the Catholic Church, the University of San Francisco divested from Palantir last May. We also know there was a Nordic asset management company, about $24 million they had invested in Palantir, and they divested from them. So there are these possibilities, and there are hospitals, sometimes even Catholic hospitals, that are getting connected to Palantir, or maybe already are, that we can engage, as well as various CEOs of different companies that use Palantir software and data and so forth. So we will send you some information about that as well. Franciscan Action Network is part of the Corporate Complicity Campaign, which is focused on Chevron and Palantir and has about 50 Christian organizations committed to that kind of work. So we hope that you'll consider joining in that process. So just a reminder, Q&A, to put your questions in there. We will come to you all in about 5 minutes or so. But let me turn to Father Jacek to share what did you notice about effective action steps from your recent visit to the West Bank, and, what would you recommend at this point?
So one of the things that I have grown into appreciation was the importance of being present. Not just being present in front of the computer screen at the webinar, but actually kind of making an effort to put oneself kind of in the trenches here in the US, but also in the West Bank. That there is something powerful about for myself and for others that go to do some accompaniment. It's not only doing things for Palestinian people, but also being kind of having opportunity to live out a faith that is real. To be faithful, and there is a beauty, there is a joy in it. I've seen that in the many volunteers that come to the Tent of Nation, a transformation, and the refusal to be a victim, refusal to be powerless vis-a-vis what's going on. Kind of in the West Bank and Gaza. So specifically, I'm organizing Franciscan Jubilee year solidarity trip to the West Bank in October to accompany Palestinians in Taipei and maybe in United Nations as well. We're at the olive harvest, so I'm organizing, and another opportunity is for people to get more involved in networks. Networks that you've heard about of course, Franciscan Action Network. There is a Catholic Caucus for Free Palestine. I'm involved in Priests Against Genocide. So you will have a link to the resource, but engaging people in your local parish, clergy, deacons, director of religious education, other lay leaders, and the diocese as well, examining how much coverage those critical issues have received in the diocesan papers, and then reaching out and lobbying not only the elected officials in Congress, but also we need to be far more kind of forceful and prophetic, challenging challenging our church, not to be afraid. We are disciples that are not giving to fear, but directed by love. Opportunities to mention kind of agitate within the church, learning more about the issues, and also making one of the things I'm going to do is at the end of March, I'm going to once again participate in those rallies to defend our democracy, No Kings rallies. I'm going to have materials connecting again the terror that our country inflicts on the people of Gaza and the West Bank with the terror that our immigrant brothers and sisters, refugees, and increasingly the Good Samaritans here in this country, the civil society experience. Everything is interconnected. So look for opportunities to join with others like-minded people and realize that you have far more power than you realize. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Father Yasik. Those sound like some great things for folks to consider. So we've heard a number of kind of effective nonviolent actions that have been recommended. We will email you a lot of these links afterwards. Just a reminder to put any more Q&A questions in the Q&A. So before I start asking some questions, let me just see if there's anybody else on the panel that has any kind of final reflections or thoughts that you want to add in about 30 seconds, or responses to anything else that was said by other panelists. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and go to Q&A then. And panelists, feel welcome to jump in. I might direct some of these questions to particular panelists. So let's start with the first question. So I think this could, maybe Father Yasik, if you want to start with this one. Do you think the return of Jesus has anything to do with the nation of modern Israel? Do the actions of Israel and its relations with the world and Christians in the world today predict Christ's return?
So we believe that the return of Christ and God's and bringing about God's kingdom has to do not with military might, but with the ultimate triumph of justice, of peace, of beloved community or God's dreams of humanity and divinity coming together. And so it's a form of aberration to see the current situation in the Holy Land with the genocide, ecocide to be used with in such a way that justifies or justify that draws on religious traditions and twist them in such a way as to justify those atrocities. It turns God into someone kind of a genocide, the one that inflicts genocide, that sanctions genocide. And this is so antithetical to the core of our Judeo-Christian faith traditions. And we have to pay attention to not to fall into that trap.
Okay, thank you, Father Jacek. Anybody else on the panel want to add anything to that question?
I would like to add that it's the notion of Jesus coming back. It's a topic that has entertained the church for many years. From our personal reflection in Palestinian liberation theology, Jesus is already here. Jesus has said in the Gospel of Matthew, quoted, when we feed a hungry person as if we have fed him, when we visit a prisoner as if we have visited him, when we clothe somebody who is naked. Our presence with the people on the margins is our presence with Jesus. At the time of Jesus, when the people were looking for the Messiah, they were looking for a different kind of Messiah. Jesus was born in Bethlehem, not where people were looking for a king to come. He came in a manger. He came with a family. He became a refugee, and I think we need to open our hearts and minds and to look for what Scripture tells us, and that should be our focus: is to be with the people who are oppressed.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Omar. Next question for Olivia. The question is, does the BDS movement as a whole have a consistent meeting with folks in the States? In other words, is it national? Is it in local communities?
Yeah, so the BDS movement is a global movement. It is led by the largest coalition of Palestinian civil society, so unions, churches, and other faith organizations, academic associations, women's groups. Every organized facet of Palestinian civil society is part of leading the BDS movement. And then we have staff globally in different regions globally. So I'm the North America coordinator, so I support BDS campaigns in the US and Canada. And we do convene meetings of different groups across the US who are working on specific campaigns. So there's the Chevron campaign, which I mentioned, and we have a lot of groups involved in that campaign, including many Christian groups. And one campaign that I think is a really good place for probably lots of folks on this webinar to start looking at is the Apartheid-Free Communities campaign, which perhaps Jennifer would like to say a bit more about because it is being spearheaded by our partners at the American Friends Service Committee. But this is a campaign that calls on institutions large and small, so congregations, businesses, local communities, local municipalities in some cases, to declare themselves apartheid free and take a pledge to do so as the first step, and then think about actions that can flow out of taking that pledge. So I really recommend looking into that as one possible avenue. But to answer your question, yes, we have meetings in the US, usually around specific campaigns, but I'm also here to just support organizations or groups of people as they think through what kind of campaign they might want to do. So I'm happy to put my email in the chat as well if anyone wants to get in touch.
Wonderful. And Olivia, there's kind of a second question here for you as well. It says, how do we advocate for corporations that are run in moral and compassionate ways as a necessary structure to defeat these evil wars?
That's an interesting question, and I suppose is a bit outside of our mandate as the BDS movement, but there is a lot of um, internal campaigning and conversations happening with every single one of our corporate targets. There are workers that are organizing inside some of these companies to pressure the company to do the right thing. There is a lot of investor engagement, so trying to engage in shareholders in these corporations to pressure the company to do the right thing, whether that be, ending their business with Israel or something else. And in some cases we've won those kinds of campaigns where we're doing this internal pressure on corporations and they say, okay, we're not going to do business in Israel anymore. Oftentimes when they make that decision, they don't say it's because of our movement or because of BDS. They say it's a financial decision, et cetera. But we do a lot of that sort of internal advocacy. And when that doesn't work, that's often when these corporations are added to the divestment list. So we're saying we tried engaging with them. They are not movable. So we are calling for institutions globally to, stop funding these corporations by investing in them.
Excellent. Great ideas. Thank you so much, Olivia. So there's another set of questions that are kind of curious about the impact of the war in Iran and how that's impacting Palestinians. Is the media being distracted by the war in Iran being used to increase violence in the West Bank, for example? And what's the feeling of the Jewish and Palestinian populations toward the Board of Peace? If folks have thoughts on that, any of those questions.
I would like to answer the first part of the question. Actually, the war on Iran now, just everybody is now watching the news about Iran and what's happening in Iran, and nobody is now talking about what's happening on the ground in the West Bank, in Gaza, all around. Settler violence is even more and more. Just in 2 days since the beginning of the war until now, 3 people, civilians, Palestinian shepherds, were killed by settlers' guns. More land is being taken. So it's really the eyes are all on Iran now, and nobody is looking at what is happening in the field. Also, one other important thing that in Israel, people have shelters. Most of people in Israel have shelters. In the West Bank, in Palestine, of course, in Gaza, nobody has shelters. Now, if the sirens go on, it's first of all, it's not a Palestinian siren. It would be from the settlements nearby. So we would hear the sirens from the settlements nearby. But then what we can do? Nothing. Just pray that we don't get a missile over our heads and that's the situation here under this subject.
Thank you so much, Amira. Does anyone want to respond to the question about Jewish and Palestinian perspectives on the Board of Peace, for example? Okay. Well, let's Omar, did you want to say something?
I just want to echo what the church leaders, especially Patriarch Cardinal Pizzabella, he said, this is not a board of peace. This is a colonial project. It does not involve Palestinians. It doesn't even have a seat for Palestinians around the table that speaks about our future. There is an international body called the United Nations. There's UN resolutions, and they should be the direction, the compass that we will use to solve international problems, not the creativity of President Trump. especially to bring people who are already accused of war crimes and wanted by the International Criminal Court to come and to be peace makers when they are themselves wanted by as war criminals.
Thank you so much, Omar. All right, we've got a number of other questions. We'll probably go for about maybe 10 more minutes or so here. Father Yasik, could you start us with this? Folks are wondering about the Catholic Church. What do you believe Catholics in our parishes can lobby church leaders to do? Some have the sense that Catholic leaders as a whole haven't been that outspoken or not adequately outspoken about this issue, particularly maybe compared to some other Christian denominations. So, what are your thoughts about those questions?
Well, it's an opportunity for those of us who were more sensitive or more kind of aware of what's going on to challenge respectfully our again clergy. Is it being preached, included in the prayer of the faithful in a meaningful way, sharing resources, connecting with other people, and kind of agitating within the system. So I do it within the network of relationships that I have within my Franciscan province, Franciscan order, and the larger church. I mean, I noted my participation in Priests Against Genocide, and focusing maybe not necessarily on kind of blame, but using the time and energy in a decisive, steadfast way to be a voice that challenge and that leads by example.
Father Yasik, there's a kind of related question. A dog. So there's kind of a related question about Pope Leo, and what has he been saying about this issue, and has he been clear on anything that would be important for us to know? And Father Yasik or anybody else on the panel, if they want to chime in on that one.
So if I may just well. Pope Leo just recently announced this Jubilee year of Saint Francis as a occasion, not for another kind of ritual or prayer service, but as in specific opportunities for us to become witnesses of peace, saints in contemporary world. So and talk to organize at your parish, agitate within the system, help out, strengthen the solidarity ties with Palestinian Christian with Palestinians in the Holy Land. Organize the Kairos Palestine study group in your parish. And if the parish says no, well, get together a few parishioners, a few family members or co-workers, friends, and do it. Small steps.
Anybody else on the panel want to respond to either what the Pope's been saying? I know clearly he's been talking about dialogue rather than war, and they refused to join the Board of Peace, even though they were invited to join as the Vatican, and certainly supporting, attention to those most at risk and those most vulnerable. Anybody else want to jump in on that? Or there's also some questions about what kind of books people could read to learn more about the issue and how to kind of work across different religions. Thoughts from our panelists?
I responded to a question in the Q&A box asking for good media resources to read just for information and history of Palestine. And I shared a resource from our partners at the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, who have a whole like Palestine 101 syllabus on their website that includes readings and videos that just explain the basic issues, I think, in a really accessible way. So I would recommend checking that out.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much.
I would also recommend one source, which is an important website. Actually, it's for the organization called B'Tselem. B'Tselem is an Israeli organization, human rights organization, who document and give you footage and numbers, everything on the day-to-day atrocities that are happening by the settlers and the IDF and the state. And they have a really important document that they published a few months ago. It's called Our Genocide, and I really recommend everyone to read it. I just posted the website on in the chat box. It's betselem.org, btselem.org. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amira. All right, there's a few other links in the chat box. We will collect these and put them in a follow-up email. Any final thoughts from our panelists that you would like to share before we wrap up?
I just want to share that Sabil is holding a worship service online this coming Thursday at 6 p.m. Jerusalem time. We're inviting people to join us in our weekly prayers for peace, for ceasefire, for saving innocent lives, for putting an end to this sanity. If people would like to join, we would love to have you join us on Thursday. Please also extend the invitation to people within your communities. I will put the link in the chat now.
Any other panelists? All right. Well, I just want to thank you all so much, particularly the panelists, for your not just your time, but your courage, your creativity, and your persistence. And just know that you are loved and that you and all of us are part of this amazing sacred family of the God of love. And we are so grateful to be on the journey with you. So there were a number of action steps that were suggested. I will just kind of recap a few of these, and then we will have our closing prayer to pause us for today. So one, to join or support delegations to Palestine with Sabil, to pray the contemporary Palestinian way of the cross with Sabil. There's also a Kairos Palestine 2 document that we'll be sending out. To support or join the unarmed civilian protection in Palestine deployments, to endorse or join the complicit corporations campaign on Chevron and Palantir, to ask priests to join Priests Against Genocide, and federal policy-wise, to contact Congress about the Block the Bombs, which is in the House, and we'll send that information to you as well, and the West Bank Violence Prevention Act, which is H.R. 3045. There will be a pretty large Christian advocacy summit in D.C. May 5th through the 7th. So we invite you to kind of mark your calendars. This is through Churches for Middle East Peace and other partners, and we'll send information about that as well. So, Father Yasik, And I think, Michelle, you want to share the video?
Mhm.
Okay.
So let us pray. Good and loving God, thank you for bringing us together. Thank you for helping us to see you hanging on the cross, crucified, starved, tortured in our Palestinian brothers and sisters in Gaza, in the West Bank. Give us the courage not to run away, not to wash our hands like Pilate did, not to succumb to fear like Peter, but to remain with you, knowing that it's not death or cruelty, indifference, violence, but that it is love that triumphs. We pray for those who are working in the trenches of the nonviolent struggle for peace, for justice, for Palestinian people, for Jewish people, for members of the international community. May we have the resolve, steadfastness to support, to be part of that renewal, to contribute to building up of a beloved community, and help us to believe that out of the ashes that we see all around us, new life can rise. We pray this in the name of Jesus Christ, who makes all things new, who conquers death, and empowers us to walk in his footsteps, of the one who is the Prince of Peace, who is the way, the truth, and the life. Amen.
Amen.
And I would like to now introduce a short video that I recorded last January when I spent the day at the parish in Taipei with Father Bashar. And Father Bashar and I now are collaborating again on organizing this solidarity efforts in October and then in between then and now. And following at the conclusion of that video, we will end our webinar. Thank you. Peace and all good.
I'm Father Bashar Fawadle, the Latin Patriarchate Parish Priest in Taipei since 2021. I'm so honored to be in your platform. So I want to bless you, to bless your Franciscan Action Network. And very much, thank you very much, Father Jacek, for everything that you are doing here in the Holy Land. Taipei is very important. If you open St. John Gospel chapter 11, verses 54, you can find that Jesus left Jerusalem after the resurrection of Lazarus and came to the nearby of the desert, to the city called Ephraim, and here is Ephraim. This church behind me, this is the church of Al-Khadr. Al-Khadr church, that means the St. George. Al-Khadr, that means in Arabic, the green that means the full of life, that give life. Here, unfortunately to say it, we can see also all over behind the church, where the settlers, the fanatic settlers attacked our land, and behind the church they burned the fire. They burned the fire 4 times, 7th of July, 8th of July, 11th of July. They burned the fire over there until here. So between the church and the fire, just 5 meters. Because we are Palestinians Christians, we want also to spread the hope. You can see this tank of water for the new olive trees. This is the olive trees. You can see these olive trees. This is the new olive trees. We had an initiative with the group from Ramallah and Jerusalem and Taipei in the place where they burned the fire. we planting new olive trees because we are rooting this land. I want to also pray for you all from the land where everything was begun. This land, Jesus was born in this land. Jesus was living in this land. Jesus was walking around this land. All of this land also Jesus was walking. In Taipei, Jesus remained a few days before his passion, his resurrection, and his death. This land needs your presence, needs your voice, needs your prayers, and need your support. So I want to invite you to be with us and to be to see our life, to be among our people, and to be in the midst of our people. Come and see, and to live with us, to remain with us. You can go and tell the truth.
The kingdom of God is justice and peace and joy in the Holy Spirit. Come, Lord, and open in us the gate to your kingdom.
And we would like to thank everyone for your participation, and especially our presenters and all those of you with big Franciscan hearted people. Peace and all good.